Welcome to Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen.
And I'm Sarah Hall.
We are here highlighting artists, activists, organizers, and agitators pushing back against late-stage capitalism here in the heart of the empire. Today is going to be a little bit different in that we are going to walk through the chaos that is the Yellow Vest protest movement going on in Europe. And joining us today is our very own producer, Barry Tanner. Hey man,
how you doing?
I'm doing all right. You're here because you have a little bit more of a unique perspective than most of the people that we know. You lived in France, and you still have friends and contacts there. So we're looking forward to whatever role you decide to play in this conversation. If you can give a little bit of backstory on who the hell Barry Tanner is, that would be great.
Oh well, I'm your producer of these shows, but yeah, from 2001 to 2003, I primarily lived in France. I was a jaded California musician / artist, mostly musician. I was told as an artist I'm a fairly good guitarist by one of the deans of art of my community in France. But I lived quite a while there, and it rejuvenated me on the musical front, the amount of respect that they have, not just for artists and musicians, but for people, for everybody, the power of the people in France. It was very inspiring.
Yeah,
and I came back here, and
we either hero worship the bad celebrity or the bad artists, or we completely shit on the good ones here. Typically, analyze them as much as possible.
Yeah, well, there's a much greater middle ground over there. Like you're saying, you're either a starving artist or you're a multimillionaire in America, and there's really nowhere in between. You go from making $30 a night to making 5,000, and all of that. Whereas in Europe, there's a big middle ground, and there's a lot of money to be, or a fair amount of money to be made in that middle ground, doing festivals, doing fets, once you get into these different circuits. And they have something very interesting. If you are a musician and you play, they know it's seasonal. So you're going to be working down in the South for 7 months out of the year, but in the winter you ain't going to have nothing to do. So if you have a certain number of black, what they call, taxed official performances on the year, which it was 60, and there's a little story about that, then in the off season, you get all your tax money back to support you during the off season, so you're not starving. You have to hit that number. You have to be official. What a and
civilized.
So I lived near Perpignan, which is the school of jazz in France.
Okay.
And a whole region in the south full of musicians and other artists. And they raised I forget, it was something like going from 60 to 72 performances before you're eligible. Mm-hmm. And they basically barricaded the prefecture's office in Perpignan. Musicians did. Okay? Nobody could get in, nobody could get out, and they had pictures of them on just a whole crowd on the steps and a couple people playing music, and they hung out there for a week.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yo, man, I play myself, and I have a lot of musician friends, and if a week is as long as a musician hangs out on your steps, man, you're ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah. So
Awesome. Yeah, the French, when they protest, I mean, you were mentioning this the other day. There is an elegance to it. Our buddy Jamarl Thomas, who is traveling abroad right now and doing his show. He was in Paris a few years ago, and there was something that they were going to be doing to the beef industry, and all of these cattle farmers started blocking off roads and bridges with herds of cattle.
Yeah.
And that was their
Or
way to protest.
the one when I was there, the Minister of Agriculture and Wine, someone along those lines, he dropped the price of grapes so low that no one was going to make any money, or brought it up so high. I forget, but it was untenable.
Yeah.
Economically for the workers and for the vintners. And so I believe it was the peripheral around Paris, they dropped slam bangs of grapes all over the freeway and then proceeded to the guy's house and dumped a couple more slam bangs on his front lawn.
So when you say slam bang, is that like tractor trailer?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
tractor trailer with two full
Yeah,
hoppers
yeah,
full,
yeah.
and just dumped them all over the place.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And so that's what I'm finding interesting if we want to move into the discussion of the yellow vests and what's going on.
Yeah, we can a little bit because we're seeing way more different pictures out of France. We did see like front end loaders dumping manure on Macron's office door, and they rolled by somebody else's house, your palace, with a septic tank, full septic tank truck spraying it.
This has happened in the last couple of weeks?
In the last
Yes.
couple of weeks.
Oh, that
yeah.
sounds very French.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I'll try and pull up some video of that.
Yeah, and we have the official charter of the Yellow
But-
Vest. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
okay.
25 propositions to get us out of the crisis. I think this is more interesting to me than things that they show burning on the news.
Yeah,
to
right.
Discredit.
Let's
a-
just
a
set
movement of
let's
people.
set American news media aside and talk about this.
Absolutely. Do you want to pick something?
Yeah. Well, what's their general statement?
Yeah, because that's where we start, right there,
Yeah.
right in the middle. That's
Politicians pretend not to understand the claims of the yellow vests, given that sufficient to us. Man, here we are. It's really come to this. huh?
Yes, it has.
But claims of some are far from sufficient to ensure a long-lasting change. Here is a non-exhaustive list. So it's basically just like 25 different. It's kind of like a if dreams were free, go big. I mean, they really cover everything here. And as far as like economy and work, they want immediately to increase the minimum wage and pensions and social security minimums by 40%.
Now, this is understanding that if we increased our social services by, say, 100%, we still wouldn't be caught up with French social services and provisos.
yes.
I think one thing that's been a thorn in the side, and I don't know if it's still involved with this, but there were riots over them raising the official work week from 32 hours to 35 hours.
The official
And
work
as
yeah.
a full-time employee, you could not work more than 32 hours a week.
no mandatory overtime.
No.
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 No,
And
60 hours a week at the same pay
So-
rate.
they're raising it to 35. We have typically a 40 to 60 hour work week in reality, and there's no For most people, especially the people working 60 hours a week in America, there's no social services.
No.
You know, that's why they're working 60 hours a week.
Right.
I think we resemble that.
And so, but yeah, we all
we
do.
very much resemble that.
And that's
remark.
something that I really noticed when I was living there, was that, well, there's a real social difference. If you are living from month to month, if you could be out on the street next month, you are very leery of letting people into your lives.
Yes.
Because, as we all know, you let the wrong person into your life and boom. Over there, it's, hi, who are you? Hey, what's going on? Ah, come on over, we'll have dinner. That sort of thing is the norm. You know, aside from the, you meet them and you kiss them immediately. I mean, there's that, which is kind of nice, but, or the focus, you know, this thing. What is this? French farmers dump hundreds of tons of manure on the streets and spray city building with slurry in day of protest. Classic.
Yes.
And that is classic. But point being that I believe the French uphold two tenets of civilization better than anybody else, and it's all based on participating democracy, but social justice, I guess you would call it, social entitlement. People can, you know, if you want to call it that, they hold the highest standard, and then to have a functioning democracy. You know, I mean, we built our whole our whole political structure is copying the French, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Which makes sense because they loaned us the money to start our experiment here anyway.
Yeah.
We started out as a debtor nation to the French.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, they've given us a lot of support over the years. But so that's the thing that I'm finding interesting with this yellow vest is I know it's a global thing.
Yes.
Everywhere. The working class is getting
Absolutely.
disenfranchised
Absolutely.
because of the big money grab at the top, and there's just no money to go around.
Economic
And it's always, you know, the Good Earth is the classic novel, Pearl Buck. You know, there's this cycle. We are definitely at that extreme of the cycle right now, where the accumulation of capital is so intense that the economy does not work for the rest of the planet.
Yeah.
And so the French are also, you know, the English, the German, the French, the Spanish, all of Europe is experiencing a similar thing to what we're experiencing in terms of being ripped off, if you want to call it that. But I am surprised to see the amount of violence and stuff that we are getting shown on the TV, because I consider that not really true French behavior.
So I mean, let's parse that a little bit, because the French people are the inventors of the guillotine.
Yes.
Which, you know, is a literal life hack to get rid of your oligarchy.
Yes.
The French Revolution was incredibly bloody. You know, it wasn't people singing at the barricades like we see in Les Mis, which is a fantastic musical. But I mean, they're not known for bloodless revolutions, is what I'm saying. I agree with you 100% that the violence that we're seeing and the fires that we're seeing is more than likely agent provocateurs and people of
This stuff all.
oh sorry
That's okay.
French intelligence or, you know, Interpol or whatever organization that exists to uphold the status quo in the European Union is that. And Marie Le Pen and her right-wing nationalists are also violent. I'm sure that there are a handful of left-wing Antifa types that are also violent. Black Bloc protesters are global. But 70%, at least as of last Saturday, we were watching Jimmy Dore's live stream show, and he was citing a couple of different outlets that had reported 70% national support for these strikes, or for these protests, even with the violence that has occurred. We're not going to see 70% approval if we started doing this in the United States right now. And we are so conditioned to react with scorn at protests in general over the last 30 years, 40 years. Do you have any kind of idea as to why there's no legitimate anti-war movement? There's no legitimate protests that don't end in unarmed people getting their heads bashed in by the police.
Or they fizzle.
Yeah.
Because of a lack of media attention. Tell you a story that goes way back in the 1972, I think, 71, bombing of Cambodia by Nixon, which was a...
And Kissinger.
And Kissinger, sure. But it was a completely internationally illegal war act. I grew up in Davis, a little town out in the Central Valley. We had the main train supplying munitions that would go through our town to Port Chicago to be shipped over there. And when that happened, our leftist mayor and my mom, many other people got together and we blockaded the tracks with bodies.
Oh, wow.
So we had people sit on the tracks, extremely well organized, and we did get one piece of publicity, which was a photograph in the back page of Life magazine, because we made all of these things happen. Inside, one interesting, the first day, the train stopped and the police did a regular sort of arrest of people, and other people were canvassing town and were already over in Woodland at the courthouse with bail money.
Okay.
So people could just, and then they'd come back, but they had managed to clear the tracks overnight. The next day the train comes up and everyone's sitting on the tracks and starts up again. There's actually a photograph of a kid up on the cattle guard, right, and people starting to scatter, and the chief of police jumps up into the cab of the engine and knocks out, KOs, and throws out the engineer and stops the train. And then he gets out and he says, okay, we're all on the same side here. And what we don't want is violence. If we
After he knocks somebody out.
Yeah, that
Okay,
was the only
beautiful.
violence.
That's beautiful.
But we don't want violence because they are ready to the National Guard is amassing in Sacramento right now. And as soon as it comes to anybody doing anything violent, they're going to be in control. Right now, we're in control. So then they proceeded to do something really cool. And they would go, say there's 50 people sitting on the tracks. They go to the first person. They say, okay, now we're going to read you your complete Miranda rights. And when we're done, you have 20 minutes to sit and decide whether you would like to walk or whether you want us to carry you off the tracks. And when you've made that decision, we'll take care of you, and then we'll move on to the next person. So they slowed they took every legal action, the police department, that they could do to slow the process down so that it became, and 2 days later, the bombing of Cambodia abruptly stopped. It never got media attention, what we did,
Wow.
okay? But it was incredibly effective.
Interesting.
So that's how I see the French,
Yeah.
as in a general rule. They don't mess around burning down their own. This is what I find very strange about the Yellow Vests, why they're doing what happened in Watts or Oakland or wherever, and having, as we see on the media, having fires, burning down local businesses,
Yeah.
disrupting their own economic benefits. I've never seen that from them.
So,
I wonder if they feel like their democracy is functioning.
Well, I think they're rebelling very righteously against the lessening of human rights.
Yes.
And that's phenomenal. But I also, and having lived through the 60s, I'm a firm believer in COINTELPRO,
yeah.
which is agitators sent by the other side just to
Yeah,
discredit what you're doing.
Yeah. We saw
And-
that with Occupy.
Sure.
Big time.
Yeah.
It's become more a narrative about homeless people and where they go to the bathroom than the people that were behind the scenes for almost half a decade, getting that movement like up and going and coordinating it across the country and timing and the
Yeah.
many beautiful people that were involved in that.
And I read recently, and I can't remember where, but I'll look for it at some point. I keep tapping the fucking thing. That this was a movement that was 5 years in the making. These Yellow Vest protests, and that the gas tax was the straw that broke the back,
strike.
because they had all of this entire platform
Machinery.
of propositions set up. They had 2,000 coordinated protests all over France on the same day. They had, clearly
And the
they
fuel
had put
tax
some
has
thought.
already been like, we're not
The-
doing that, we're
Ma-
not touching that.
Oh,
They've
yeah, no,
already
he
won
dropped
on
that,
front.
yes.
Yeah, Macron dropped the fuel tax, but the problem with the
Like
fuel
a
tax
hot
is that
potato.
it was all being levied on France's 99%.
Yeah.
Their elite were not going to feel any kind of discomfort.
It was a regressive tax.
Yes, and that's neoliberalism in a nutshell. Privatize the profit, socialize the losses, and spread that pain around. And they were billing Macron as like France's Obama.
Yeah.
Do you remember Obama going over there and like stumping for him a little bit and shit like that? And it
And honestly, I still don't have an overall negative opinion of Macron. I talked to friends over there who, there's things he did. He had an interior minister for security, a friend of his that he hired or something like that, and the guy ends up tooling around on a scooter with his mistress all over town, and getting busted for that. And
That's not news there, is it?
no,
I know, and
isn't it more
Is
of a
that
crime in
news?
France to be caught in public with your wife than your mistress?
probably,
Oh, dear.
yeah. But yeah, I mean the level of in other words, what they go through politically is, I think, what can I say, cleaner than American politics somehow. There seems to be a little, and I think it's because people participate. Obviously, if you can have a democracy, vote, for Christ's sake.
So,
Thank
so
you.
here's the thing about that, though, man. If you're looking any kind of logically at the American political system, and you're like me, where you make shit, and you're a genuine anti-war human being, you're looking at both political parties going, I have no representation here. Management makes 100% of the decisions in both of these political parties. There's no worker representation. There's 10.67% union membership nationwide. It's the lowest that it's ever been since we've formed union, and it's getting worse. Then I'm going to vote outside of the duopoly if I exercise my right to vote. I'm going to vote on propositions and ballot measures that will affect me, but in terms of metaphorically pulling a lever for the lesser of two evils, it is
if you don't do it, you're giving your vote to the greater of two evils.
well, that's the conventional wisdom, yeah, but which is the greater of two evils? The evil that is done in broad daylight with no fucking give a damn, or the evil that's done behind closed doors while presenting a smiling face of compassion?
Well, I guess I have a somewhat different take because, or I don't know because, but I grew up in a very political environment, extremely, and leftist political. And knew a lot of people who started out as leftist students. 10 years my senior, 10 years younger than my folks, but in the older of the baby boomers. And I watched a lot of politics go down. My mom was extremely involved in state politics. And it is a game, and it's like Frank Zappa said about music, but worse. It's full of liars and thieves and other undesirables, and there's also a downside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We can follow in a sewer all day.
You're dealing with close to 400 million people in national politics, or however many, and so you get involved because, say, of an issue because you're an environmentalist.
Yeah.
You want to push your environmental legislation. You want to get some pull. You have to kiss some serious butt on your way to getting that done. And you're lucky if you don't just get bought and paid for, and I saw that happen to quite a few people. But I also saw people actually affect the change, like sitting on the tracks. This was politicians. The mayor of the town was involved in that.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I believe, as they say, all politics is local. And most effect that you can have is in your local politics, which is typically as corrupt, if not more corrupt, than the larger politics, but easier to swim your way through the sludge to get to your little gold ring at the end that you're trying to do. And that's just what it is. But that's what politics have been since the first frickin' caveman picked up a big bone and said, I'm ruling this, And so is the accumulation, all of those things. The only difference and the only way to make it work is by doing what the French are doing.
Yeah.
By standing up. And what was you said the other day, I think this was your line, that the only time they're going to turn off or walk away from their couch and their TV is when they don't have a couch and TV anymore. And that's America in a nutshell, And sure, I'm a political junkie. I watch all of the
Screaming heads.
Yeah, all the
My
screaming
mom
heads,
calls
as
them
long as I
screaming
can
heads.
stand it, to try and
I do it
glean
with
a
her
little
at
bit
night.
of truth out of
Paid
it.
professional gaslighters.
And it's interesting because I remember being in like elementary school, and the big thing they were talking about in civics or history or whatever was the Russian media and how the citizens and state TV and Nazi Germany as well, that the citizen had to interpret what they were reading to see if they could glean any truth out of it. And here we are. Right?
Yep.
It's so.
Well, the notion that CNN or Fox or ABC or NBC isn't U.S. state media is fucking preposterous. I don't know how much of this I can play without getting yelled at by YouTube.
I feel like I missed an opportunity to give a shout out to Justin Cummings.
Oh,
when
please
he
do.
Touched on
Please do while I pull this up.
act locally, think globally. He was just sworn into the city council.
I saw that
yesterday. So I
and
thought
he was the
really
leading
good
vote
piece of
getter.
news
He's
for
going to be
us.
the mayor.
I felt like that was a really good piece of news for us, and very refreshing. And
Yeah.
we're very lucky to have him.
And
that he's
that's
decided
what-
to step
yeah.
up to this incredible challenge and
Right.
take on things like rent control for us.
Yeah, and hopefully he will be somewhat successful with it. You know, and
it takes a village.
It does, and it takes
to a more city meetings. I know that.
I think in relation, and it's the same thing. Back to France. You know, I mean, they have terrible TV, for one thing. It's horrible, and their radio is horrible
That's
as well.
covered in their
But
demands.
they do have a lot of let's say they're more liberal with nudity and things like that,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
know, and then they have talk shows with with the old French fellow and all the young ladies around. This is really a popular theme in France too.
Lots
But-
of
Yeah,
bet
yeah.
it is.
lots of May December loving.
And they have local news shows and international, but they do have BBC. They do have Reuters. They do get a more, you know, somewhat more broad-based input of information of what's going. We don't get any footage from Yemen and from things like that are really going on. They see more of that.
Not since they took Al Jazeera
But
TV
once again-
off the air.
Yeah, but once again, it's about them taking the time to the French. I'm not knowing,
Yeah.
but the French taking the time to actually read and study and
engage with each other.
engage with a
Well, they've
lot of
got-
engaging with each other, even the right and the left. I've been in towns where you've got the Le Pen ultra right, which is, you know, pretty damn, it's a fascism party,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the local French hippies and that whole left side. Well, you know, and they have a festival. They're all there.
Yeah.
Everybody's having a good time, right? And there's places where, you know, we were told as musicians, you probably shouldn't go to that town. It's probably not a good idea. But that's few and far between, you know? And so we digest as Americans, we don't read. And what we do read and what we do research is, like you say, you know, under the thumb of the people that don't want you to know what they're doing. But there are other avenues. I guess we've gone into using the internet more and using the younger demographic, which was maybe hopeful, although looking for information that purely buttresses your own point of view is kind of pointless. I mean, you know, it's nice, it's very good to see the other side. And I have some very conservative friends on Facebook that I follow because I want to know how these people are thinking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are they really? And
I'm
what I
always hoping
find,
for a turn.
oh,
To, like, an
what I find
opportunity to
is
flip.
I have no shortage of opportunities to send my cousin, the most conservative guy I know, things that we can both agree on. You know?
That's what it's going to take.
That's the starting point
Absolutely.
for us to be no longer divided,
Well,
is for all of us to find things that you can agree with on your most opposite person.
We've always got the sky is blue.
I've got.
Yeah. And if they, and if they don't, there's a certain cutoff point.
Yeah,
If you
right.
say the sky is blue and they say no, or you say the earth is round, they say it's flat, stop interacting with them.
Steve helped me with that. I was like, wow, I feel lighter all of a sudden, like a month into our project.
Yeah. Or have fun with them. Maybe,
Swallowing.
Just don't go there with them anymore.
I think important to finding things you can agree on is also encouraging people to decouple themselves from corporate media, and this is why. I'm going to play a little bit of this right here. This is Jimmy Dore. He just put this up, and
Can't really hear it.
I'm gonna add some volume.
The sound engineer is like,
But
this is getting on my
I'm gonna
last
add some
nerve
volume
already.
after it gets rolling a little.
Yeah, get over there. Come on.
Who did he turn down to keep doing his own show?
He turned down RT Network. Come on.
There you go.
Court charge of collusion, which is treason, between the Trump campaign and Russia. There hasn't been any, but the news media, but people still think there is. People think there's all this evidence just because of the way the news media has been reporting it. And now I want you to watch this, because this will show you that every day they say, we got him. Remember, we make fun of this. We got him. And then, okay, it turns out we don't got him. We got all breaking bombshell, and then the story fizzles. People get punished for writing a bullshit story, or they don't get punished.
Most of the times the latter.
The latter. More times than not, no one gets held accountable for filing a false story in the Russiagate thing, because it's all false. Rachel Maddow's whole
If the
show
redhead
is
looks
just one big
familiar, it's
conspiracy
because we
theory.
had him on.
One big
That's
conspiracy
wrong
theory
with
with no
that.
evidence, and she's
yeah,
linked
just
everything to that conspiracy. She said Rex
the guy who was
Tillerson, the
just
head
on,
of
not Jimmy
the
Dore yet. We'd
ex-CEO
love to
of
have
Exxon
Jimmy Dore on
was
the
a
show.
Putin puppet. She
If
said that about
anybody's
him.
listening right now and can get a hold of Jimmy Dore to get his,
That's called
His
McCarthyism. That's
assistant's
red
number.
baiting. And so
That's actually
this is, they
wrong.
put, so I guess someone over at Super Deluxe Cuts figured this out, and they put this together. Here we go. Donald Trump's done. He's done. There's no question about that. He's done.
Breaking news.
A bombshell.
Today is a turning point. Today was historically bad for President Trump.
Today was a turning point.
A turning point.
We're at a turning point here.
The beginning of the end for the Trump presidency.
The beginning of the end.
And breaking news,
We have another bombshell.
Mike Pence might have to assume the office of the presidency.
The call for impeachment.
Rumblings of the word impeachment.
Breaking news.
Another bombshell out of the White House.
I believe this is the beginning of the end.
I do too.
It's really the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end.
He may be feeling the walls closing in on him.
All the walls closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
For any of our
Breaking news
viewers that
bombshell.
can't
One
see this,
astrologer
this is
says
rolling
means
through the
beginning of
months,
end
like
for President
every
Donald Trump. The beginning of
2
the end
weeks,
of the
every 4
presidency.
weeks.
So and that's just on Russiagate, and that's which I believe is a bullshit narrative. But these are the people that are ostensibly influencing voters. That's and for them to have it's so easy to put these mashups together where they're all just repeating the exact same thing, and at the end of it there's never any there. Like, it turns out that Paul Manafort was arrested for everything but orchestrating collusion. Then they come out with a bullshit story in The Guardian that was completely 100% utterly false. The Guardian's getting sued for the story about Manafort meeting with Julian Assange 3 times, once in 2016, right before the WikiLeaks, emails came out. And it's 100% false.
Okay. I find, obviously, it's just there's such a dissemination of information and misinformation in our news. It's hard to know what's going on.
Nauseating.
But the one thing I find very interesting is in all the stuff that they are talking about, they are not mentioning what I consider to be the truth of the matter. And which is on the north slope of the USS of Russia. There is billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of oil, which, because of the sanctions put on, and most of it is owned by ExxonMobil. Remember a guy named Rex Tillerson who was first into the administration for a while until he realized that the seat was a little hot and he better get the heck out of there.
Well, he didn't get his deal. He became Secretary of State to get his deal,
and that was his deal.
Yeah,
that was the deal.
Yeah,
and that is how all of these guys ended up. And in terms of collusion, I definitely don't put it past Putin to try to destabilize our democracy and try and mess with us in any way that he can. And if that is the case, that he's doing what some of the news things expose, he's doing a phenomenal job of it, right? I mean,
credit where credit is due.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that now the Democrats, the left is railing against Putin, and the right, well, there's this anti-Russia sentiment which the Republicans are dead silent on.
Yeah.
But the left, or the supposed left, whatever, the Pelosi left, you're the people you don't like over on that side too.
Right. Yeah. Center right.
They're making all this noise. Now let's go back to the 60s. We were all socialists in the 60s. And even though the right was making Russia into a huge enemy, do you remember Bob Dylan?
Yeah.
We've learned to hate the Russians all through our whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight.
John Birch Society blues.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this picture is completely flipped.
Yes.
Right? Now the Soviet Union is gone, but and it's interesting because really what we were was demo socialists, and we should have all been just promoting Sweden, and France. Countries in that, and that's the big confusion too. Nobody really understands the difference between communism, socialism, and democratic socialism.
Agreed.
And for democratic socialism to have that name of socialism attached to it is its curse.
Yeah.
Because all that means is government is there to serve the people. It's that simple.
Well, and democratic socialists are free market capitalists too. They're
not.
In any way, shape, or form advocating that workers get the means of production. They're not.
No.
I have a little bit of a problem with that model because, again, I am much more socialist, but I don't subscribe to the notion that that socialism means you give everything to the government. I don't. I think that workers can have the means of production without giving everything to their government. The narrative, though, is that Nancy Pelosi is some kind of wild-eyed fucking commie. And her own personal wealth has increased by over $140 million since she's been an elected.
Oh, both of our ladies. I mean, you have to remember, they both come from the business sector, real estate.
Don't get me going on Feinstein, man. I'll fucking...
Okay, yeah, let's...
Hey, you know what? But here's the thing. I've never been big fans of either. I've never been big fans of either of them. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying about, it's all just one party, blah, 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 blah. However, the constituency base of Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat Party is their base because of social program.
What they did 50 years ago, yes.
Right. Well, now, if their base stands up and says, we want this or we're not voting for you, guess what? It's going to happen.
So,
once again, the difference between here and France. Look how long it took for that tax thing, the gas tax, to get thrown out the window.
3 weeks.
Right? Okay. If the American people, which includes my cousin on the right, who just had to have back surgery or whatever on Medi-Cal or on, if we can all agree, hey, don't listen to the media. This is a good thing. Tell your representative, if it ain't pushed through, I ain't voting for you. Right? And stand up and do some rather demonstrative but pointed acts. Don't go burn down downtown Oakland. Ain't going to help anything.
No.
But do as you're saying. They took 5 years to put their whole organization together. Wasn't just so they could start fires and trash cans.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's
No,
not
You know-
I agree with
France
that
now.
100%. No, it's moved into, there's yellow vest protests in like a half a dozen or more countries right now.
Germany.
Yeah.
Moving into
Sweden.
Israel, Brussels, Switzerland.
I mean, they're still a 99%
Yeah.
big organization. And like I said, the problem with that is one problem is it died on the vine. The other problem is it just turned into long-term homeless camps, which,
Those were already there.
Right.
Come on,
well,
man.
it brought them into focus.
That's where it
You know.
goes off, is we forget that is already there, existing every single day.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
It,
Yeah, but it does
we
not...
didn't bring that with us, and all of a sudden we created that problem. But that's what we were made
That's
to
how
feel
it-
like, and
but exactly.
what it was portrayed as.
Yes, because it gave them a photo op,
Yeah.
you know,
I-
and then
I
it
like-
managed to...
And a scapegoat.
If this
Yeah.
is
A
like
scapegoat that
extreme,
people are hardwired to ignore or despise or be indifferent to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they've got their sights on health and ecology. They want to take on planned obsolescence, plastics in their environment. Pharmaceutical companies, which I imagine are doing the same thing they're doing to us here.
No.
Making
No,
a doctor
not at the same scope.
You know,
not forcing.
in order
yeah,
to be a
they're-
physician in France, after you finished all of your, Western medical
They're trying
practice,
to take
you
that
have to
away.
spend a year studying alternative medicine and homeopathy before you get your physician's
No,
thing.
that's unique.
And they
Is that unique to France or is that
Oh, it's
a
France.
European? Okay.
That's France. They have the incredible help. I had to call them in the middle of the night. My friend was having some sort of anaphylactic or whatever, and they up rolls this woman in her 50s on a little scooter with a brown bag, wearing leopard skin yoga pants. And
Nurse Peg Bundy is here
see her
on a moto scooter.
comes up and checks her out, and this is a house call. Okay, this is for foreign I'm not in the health organization. So that call, the paracetamol, which is basically aspirin, and a follow-up visit to a doctor in a clinic, cost us €100, roughly $120 for all of that, as a non-citizen.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was immediate.
Wow.
It was, and people go from England who have health issues and get their residency in France, which is part of the problem of what they're having. See,
Afraid of losing that, what you're
Well,
talking about.
we have a problem with overcrowding in Santa Cruz. Why? Because everybody wants to live here. This is the same
We
thing.
just had 30,000 people become refugees.
58,000.
Also. 58,000 from
From
Paradise,
From
so
Butte
that
County
didn't-
alone.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
how many
no.
people were displaced
but-
in Malibu.
But the same thing is true, especially in southern France. Okay, all the Brits, all the Swedes,
Yeah.
this flood of, that's great for them, because all of these people had the money to liquidate in England or Sweden or Norway and come down to southern France and buy a place and be retirees or whatever. But they all end up, once they do that and they get their residency and they're part of the EU, which is easier than for me being from outside, then they're eligible for this incredible free French health insurance and care. And there are many people who have gotten diseases, had diseases here in America, who have just said, "Screw it, I'm going to France, and I'm going to pay." At the time when I was over there, you could pay $10,000 and become a full participant in the free French healthcare system.
Wow.
Okay, so people are going and doing that. Well, what is that doing? That is putting a huge load on the economics of the social welfare in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So now Macron is going, okay, these people have taken all the money, and this is now these folks are coming here along with immigrants, etc., and are jumping into our social system, but we don't have any way to pay for it. So what the heck are we going to do? You know, and obviously the smart thing would be, well, let's break out the guillotine and just start holding the uber wealthy accountable. You know.
Yeah.
You know what happens to people that do that in politics?
They get shot.
That's it, dude. So
that
then,
was a long time ago. We have drone docs now.
oh yeah, there's all.
You know,
or they
swarms are just going to come.
they
out of
shake
the
they shake
ground.
hands with the wrong person in the crowd.
Yep.
Boom, and they're gone. You know.
Mosquito drone.
I mean, there are just so many. There's so
Cross-pollinate a crop
so you're
or
in a
two.
so he's in a position now. How much of the gas tax? I'm wondering, and I don't know if Taibbi or anybody came up with this. How much of that is going towards social services or environmental causes?
Good question.
Well, there's no tax anymore, so.
But if it were implemented,
Yeah.
where was that money going? Was that going into tax breaks for the wealthy, like we would do in this country?
Yeah, see, that's what
Or
I
is it
assume
actually-
as an American,
Yeah.
and that's why people are so angry. But that was a really good question.
Well, if he's running a
Could be
huge
different
deficit,
there.
you're running a country. Your job is to avoid putting it in a financial hole and
good
becoming bankrupt. Like,
So, Macron, I'm going to quote Taibbi here. Macron was the former investment bankers program was aimed at stimulating growth through corporate investment. That was Macron's plan coming in, was to stimulate France's economy through that. And he kicked off his regime by slashing a wealth tax and pledging to cut 120,000 public sector jobs. Like that's like day one, you know. There was a 2004 holiday tax that was passed, and that's what he was basing his tax cuts off of, was making those larger and more permanent. Macron right now has a 23% approval rating. That is right about what George Bush's was when he left office. Donald Trump, the last one I saw, has a 47% approval rating.
yeah,
And then
you
Hillary,
know, in our country though, they do not call cell phones.
right? Yeah, you know, the polling
Okay.
is all fucked off here, and I know that they're calling the
Youth,
fucking
anyone under 30 doesn't have a landline, so they're only polling people in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Oh no, there was a poll that came out that showed that Joe Biden was the strongest presidential candidate. You
Yeah.
know, and I'm pretty sure that they took that poll like inside of Peter Dow's living room.
Yeah,
You know, or like
the day that he told a good joke.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Oh, he did tell a good joke the other day during Let's All Mourn George H.W. Bush. He said out loud in front of people that he was the most qualified person to run for president in 2020.
That George Bush was?
No,
Or
that
the-
Biden was.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
Barry's not laughing.
stay away from the plagiarism, dude. Maybe you'll have a chance.
Who, Biden? No.
Yeah, that's what brought him down in his initial run for You know, I mean, it
I
doesn't take
remember.
much.
I remember.
Remember Howard Dean, you know, what they trumped up on him.
Oh, Jesus
Or
Christ.
John Edwards, or, you know, I mean, and it's interesting because none of those people had the wherewithal that Trump has to play the freaking media, you know.
Well, yeah, Trump's a fucking game show host.
Yeah.
You know, he knows how to freaking work the media. Howard Dean is probably one of the more disappointing public figures over the last 15, 20 years, man, because he used to start his speeches with, "I'm from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party." You know, and he had this left-wing populism that he was building a movement on, and now he is a pharmaceutical lobbyist and gaslights people and tells them that fucking, you know, if you voted for Jill Stein in an all-blue state that went for Hillary Clinton by fucking in excess of 3.5 million votes, that you're the reason that Trump got elected. Like, that's Howard Dean's fucking bullshit right now.
Well.
Anyway,
I think we should kind of wrap this up here, if you don't mind. I got another.
okay.
Another
I
agenda
do. I
item.
want to take a look at a couple of things real here on the Yellow Vest, mission statement, and to kind of highlight as you've been doing so well throughout this show so far, like the differences between what's right wing in France and what's right wing in here, and like where their starting point. They have geopolitical demands. Exit NATO. Prevent migratory flow that cannot be accommodated without integrating, given the civilizational crisis we are experiencing. Sounds very jingoistic and nationalistic. And at the same time, they say France's relationship with its former African colonies need to stop looting and political and military interference. Give the art of dictators and ill-gotten property back to the African people. End the CFA franc system that keeps Africa in poverty. That's
from the right.
And that's from the right.
Yeah.
That
Build a wall.
right.
Who's going to pay for it?
So yeah, it goes back to they read, they study, they may have their left or right opinions, but at least they're half intelligent, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's way better than they took our jobs.
yeah.
Space farce.
Yeah. Oh, Space Force.
That's still a thing. Oh my God.
But they wanna exit the EU, while ending lobbyists, and an immediate shutdown of privatization and recovery of public property, motorways, airports, car parks, and train systems. And that's their right wing.
Yeah. Right.
Which is, you know,
And they're not fight-
what that tells me is that they did spend 5 years putting this together. They had a coalition of people. It wasn't just
Exactly.
one guy sitting in his mom's basement, you know,
Right.
fucking with like Sean Hannity on in the background, thinking about how much he hates immigrants, you know.
Yeah. It's a big problem in Europe right now, believe me. And they've nailed it on the head, because the reason they're having an immigration problem in Europe is because of their post-colonialism in the third world. And because of our
Beautifully said.
also intervention in the third world. I mean, if there's any reason the third world is the third world, it's because we have
imperialism.
kept it that way.
Yeah.
And this is something we've talked about a little bit before, is that both England and France are post-imperialistic. They're in their post-imperialistic phase, which is what we are beginning to drop into ourselves as a nation. And because China and Russia and Japan and Korea and those countries are ramping up their game and becoming, especially China is becoming somewhat the imperialistic neighbor, you know, which we don't really hear that much about, but, you know, who's providing all the equipment in Iran, for example, is China.
China has quietly been getting a foothold in the African continent, but through the exact opposite way that we do it. We fight proxy wars.
Yeah.
China just walked in with a pile of money
Exactly.
and said, "Hey, we'd like to buy your stuff."
Yeah, exactly. No, you're very right about that. But now, so America is in this post-imperialist phase that both of those, particularly in the recent history, England and France, but you could go Portugal, Spain, Germany gave it a shot, so to speak, and us. Well, Germany's landlocked. I mean, they couldn't be an imperialist power because they can't launch their ships, and until the 20th century, that was how you became an imperialist.
Yeah.
We weren't putting slaves on 747s and flying them over here, right? So we have to we have to recognize as a society that is the phase we're going into. And France did a couple very smart things when we're not running the world anymore. Well, let's become energy independent, right? Let's take all of that wealth that imperialism created and lop their heads off and take their money, right, and put that into the coffers and then let's be a somewhat self-enclosed economy and circular, with the benefit of tourism, of course.
Yes.
So that's the other thing that we have to do. The French going, well then, and this is totally French, let's see, we can't rule the world. Let's make it very pretty here. Right?
Give us something nice to look at.
Yeah, and I mean, I've watched the whole thing because I was down in the Catalan side of the Pyrenees, and then there's the Basque side on the other side, and in Spain they riot, and in France they say, "Oh yes, I think we have a problem. We must get a bottle of wine, some cheese, some bread, some saucisson."
That's exactly what I've been picturing
Right?
in my head too.
And figure this out.
That's exactly what I've been picturing.
That is their society. It is, even in their extreme differences.
Yeah.
I had to. You'd go to a restaurant, especially tapas restaurant, is one of my favorite places. Tiny little place. Okay, and they have a chalkboard that you order, and it's the bartender who's your waiter as well.
Okay.
Oh no, the bartender's the chef, and then the waiter is the waiter. But and they have a grill on the backside of the bar, right?
Okay.
And you get all these, but it's a really tiny place, and they take one order on the chalkboard, give it to the bartender. When he has time, he makes that one order, and brings it out, and then the waiter grabs the chalkboard and wipes it off and goes to the next person. And what would you? So it takes, it could take an hour if a place is crowded, hour and a half to eat. What do people do? They make one big table, and when it's your turn to order, you order for everybody.
Oh wow.
So if you're going to get blood sausage or champignon or gambas or whatever, you get, just make a big plate of gambas and bring it over. In the meantime, they have this wonderful French bread, right, and wine. Now, if you buy a bottled water, it's $2.50. But if you would like wine and French bread included, it's all you can eat and drink for $2.
Oh wow.
And so the waiter is right next to your table in a little place maybe that far away. He's got this big old knife, and he's got this loaf of bread, and he's cutting off big pieces and throwing them in the tray, and then coming around with the wine, and anyone who's empty, he's filling it up. What happens, this is where I met the owner of the Norwegian cruise lines.
Okay.
Certainly not a radical,
Right.
him and his wife, but they're vacationing down there. And my mother, who I brought over, and myself, and an Irish exchange student and the head of Norwegian Cruise Lines' wife are sitting at the same table having conversations, right? And every night that I went out, that's just one example of that sort of togetherness, you know, and ability to expectation, not just ability, but the expectation that if you go out, you will mingle. They have an expression, c'est normal. It's normal, right? And if you go out to a place to eat, you are going to sit next to somebody from anywhere. Nigeria, I had some Nigerian friends, for example, who were great. This one woman who was a princess and she was a singer, you know. I mean, and you'd sit with, she'd be on my right-hand side and a Moroccan banker on my left-hand side and Catalan hippies sitting across from us. And, you know, I mean, they force this interaction by their culture. And
but at the same time, they pull back. They become very like anti-immigrant. So if you you can, it's a weird dichotomy when you can assume diversity in conversation with when you're out, but have this nationalistic sentiment that drives what your identity and what you do as a or at least the French that I have met, that I've known, that I've got to spend some time with in my life, and I haven't traveled in a while, but I did spend some time in France. It was 98, 99.
Back in the 1900s.
Yeah, back in
That's how we
the
say
previous century.
Right.
Yeah, well,
and I told people I was Californian when I was in France, as opposed to American.
oh, so do I. That was normal for us too. Are you an American? No,
I'm from
California.
California.
Yeah, and this was when Bush was president,
good to know.
and they'd say, "What do you think of your president?" I said, "Oh, I think Clinton was pretty good, actually." Yeah, I'm not. Bush ain't my president. I didn't vote for him. Nobody voted for him. They stole it.
Supreme Court
Right?
voted. The Supreme
Yeah.
Court got that guy elected.
Yeah. So, but
Oh, this is the anniversary of the shoe thrower
oh, it is
today. Yeah, today's the day that the dude threw shoes at George Bush.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But the immigration thing is interesting because a part of it, like the thing that they had about the Muslim head pieces and stuff,
The burqa ban.
and you can say they're very arrogant people. They believe in their society and in their way of living, and they expect that if you are going to move to France and live in France, you are going to adopt French culture. You are not here to insinuate your culture. Although, if it's American blues,
Right.
yeah, they'll take all they can get, right? But they still for myself, I was there for 2 months, 3 months. I didn't know the language. And my favorite club owner, I'm in there getting my cappuccino in the morning, says, "You have 2 months to learn to order that cappuccino in French. You've been here long enough. You learn our language now." And the whole time I was interacting with him, of course, there's one of the locals who, generally you go, and if you don't speak the language, at least in this area, there's a French person that does, or a Swedish person, or another American or a Brit, and they interpret for you, And so I finally did learn enough to be able to order and be able to converse to some extent. And this fellow who had never been helpful at all. In fact, he had said, "Ne parle anglais," more than once to me.
Yeah.
And so I went up and ordered, and he turned to me and in perfectly fine English said, "Good, you finally learned our language." Okay. And they're very, and I can't say, as I will totally disavow that philosophy either. And there is something, there is a certain responsibility of someone who is immigrating from a place that they don't want to be anymore to a place that they do want to be, there is an obligation, I think, there to try to become legal,
Yeah.
and two, to when in Rome,
Yeah.
do as the Romans.
I definitely,
And-
I agree with that. I
which
do.
is something we've dropped the ball on here.
Yeah, we have.
And
Yeah.
through education,
Yep.
through not having enough early childhood or adult education, just for the language,
Yeah.
and which is cool on the other side, I guess, because you got Little Italy in New York. You've got these little clusters all over the country, or down in the Creole lands, in Louisiana, where it's an entirely different culture and a different language and all of that. But the French, they expect it to, you learn French, you learn our customs, you live as we live if you're going to live here. And they lost how many million people in World War II?
Oh yeah. Jesus.
I mean, I think it was 5 million.
I was
Something
gonna
like
say
about 5 million people.
It was close to the. Yeah.
You know who killed most of those people? Most of the civilians, anyway? Us. The Allied forces with the
I
carpet
was gonna
bombing.
say, yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember.
We killed more innocent civilians in France than the Germans or the Italians.
We're number
combined.
one.
So that's another thing about Europe as opposed to here. The realities of war and
Well, I mean,
It's
that's intentional. One of the things that is often cited, and correctly so in my opinion, as to what turned the tide in Vietnam wasn't Cronkite saying, "Oh, it's a mess." It was the fact that we saw images of war,
Right.
And not like right now they'll show you the bomb taking off.
yeah,
They'll even show you a long distance shot of it blowing up.
yeah,
But they're not showing you what
the
happens
baby's
at-
body parts flying through the air. No.
and we don't. But Lauren Steiner, when she was on this show, she brought this up too. Like, unless the American people have an image in their head of the actual cost of war, we're not going to do a fucking thing. It'll just be one of those
Yep.
better over there than here.
Yeah,
you know.
One of the things I noticed too in Europe, and in France and Spain, at least in that Catalan region, I saw it pretty much everywhere I went in that area, but I didn't go everywhere. But there are blown up, burned out stone farmhouses out everywhere. And they could have torn it down and built something nice, but they didn't. A friend of mine took me at one point to this little point, not far from where we were living, along the Mediterranean. And it juts out, and there's a fence, and you have to go across the fence. And it was a German bunker underground, and so you can still go there.
Yeah.
And they have a lighthouse at it, and the thing is just blown to bits. Okay, and you're walking around, you're seeing these you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't cover that
Extremely
stuff up.
visceral.
Yeah, no, we super sanitize that shit. When I was a kid, I went to Japan with my grandparents. My grandparents were missionaries. They had friends in Osaka. They took me and my older cousin Todd. And when we got to Hiroshima, like, they left so much of
Yeah.
the buildings up from when we dropped that bomb. Man, there's like you were saying, there's blown out buildings. There's a whole area where the trees that weren't destroyed grow are a lot. They're still there, but they do not produce leaves. They do not produce fruit.
And they don't cut them down. What do we do?
Don't cut them down.
We've had
Put a fucking mall over that shit.
We've had one theoretical invasion in this country, what did we rebuilt it taller?
Yeah. Yup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note.
On that note, all right, it's been Slow News Day. We thank you, Barry, for taking the time with us.
My pleasure.
It's been fun. I can only, I can only hope for more and better reporting out of France, and that the overall sentiment that neoliberal globalism is destroying their country resonates with us a little bit as well. Little bit.
Just
Yeah.
little.
Little bit.
Well, I hope there was a lot of coming back here was a conscious decision to try to affect that sort of change. Because it was really nice over there too.
Yeah. This is a great little hub for a revolution, man. I'll say that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're loving the content, like our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, follow us on Twitter. We will see you very soon. Have a wonderful day.
Over and out.